Alright, so today I'll be performing the chicken wing dissection. Alright, so here you see we have the chicken wing. Before we get into doing anything, here we have the parts of the chicken wing here. This part that's around here is the upper wing or the arm of the chicken. This part here that we have at the center, from here to here, is the lower wing or the forearm of the chicken. And here we have the tip of the wing, which is kind of comparable to the human hand. But this is the front of the chicken, and this is the back of the chicken. And if you look, even before we cut it, we already have visible parts like this muscle extension out of the triceps of the back, and we have different layers of yellow that we see, which would be fat tissue. Also, if you look at the front, you can see cartilage lining up parts of the ends of the bones, which will go into once we start cutting up the chicken. So let's cut up the chicken now. So we'll cut it like this. I'm going to cut instead from the tip of it here. Alright, so now I've cut up the skin of the chicken wing, and now we have the muscles that we're going to go through. So let's look at the upper wing first. In the upper wing, at the end here, you have the triceps muscle, and then over here, you have the biceps muscle. Sorry, it's kind of flimsy. The biceps muscle that you can see here. And then, of course, along the forearm, we have different muscles like flexor, carpi ulnaris, and radialis. And then, if you look at the tip of the wing, we have that's where your phalanges and metacarpals are, which they're actually kind of fused in a bird's wing, so they're not as identifiable. So, for the sake of time, let's focus on the different structures here and more of the chicken wing. So, we have the different joints here as well. If you look at the joints here, we have the elbow joint here, your wrist joint, and this would form your shoulder joint with the chicken shoulder. So if you look at the elbow joint and look at its movement here, it's obvious that this is the biceps here. It has your two heads, one, two, long, short head, and when you move it this way, it flexes. What happens when it flexes? It moves the entire arm wing with us, and that's comparable to how when humans flex, all of their arm, including their hand, can move. They can move back. So similar with the chicken wing. And even here in the wrist joint between the forearm and the tip, it can also flex. And of course, while the interior part is flexing, as is the rule in the arm, like this, the posterior side is extending. So that's what we have. Now, tendons are one of the most obvious because if you look here, tendons, we know that they attach muscles to bone. So if you look here, you see that tendon, the white strip of tissue, fibrous tissue going from the muscle into the bone, the muscle of the forearm into the bone of the tip. So that's another example. This is another example here. So now we're going to cut it and look for the bones and all the rest of the structure. Yeah, so cutting the muscle, this, it all. All right, so finally we cut off the muscles and we have the bones left. All right. So if you look at the bone structure of the chicken wing, first you have the humerus here. Humerus attaches to the radius and ulnar. Radius, thinner part, ulnar, the thicker part here, the forearm. And then you have the wing of the tip, which has the bones of the metacarpal that attach to the phalanges, very tip of the bone. Now, if you just look at the bone structure, you'll see it's much more reddish. So the blood is actually much more visible than the muscles. And that makes sense, right? Because the blood cells originate in bone marrow of our body. So it's actually much more visible here at its core. So you see here spots of blood, and as well here, right? And then one final part that you'll see here is the ligament, which attaches bone to bone. the ligaments that form at the joints. The joints themselves are actually also more noticeable. So extension, flexion of the elbow joint, and then flexion, extension of the wrist joint. And then we're going to cut one final part. Okay, so after the final cutting, you see that we have inside the ligament, we have the cartilage. This cartilage that lines up the ends of your bone. So this is one more prominent feature. And then lastly, we have inside here, I just cut up the radius, you have the bone marrow. This is where your red blood cells will grow, and also so you have some fat here as well. And so that's what we have for the chicken wing.